Westmoreland comes back from Vietnam, hooks up with this guy Buning, and suddenly the Army Champs program becomes a big deal. And no one ever mentions my name anymore. Even though I had been dead for over 20 years, I still had my spies at the Pentagon who informed me that when the Army Champs program was conceived, Westy had this fresco painted on the ceiling of his office, an obvious steal of Michelangelo's creation on the Sistine Chapel ceiling. He probably saw the notes I left and commandeered the sport of handball for himself. Now he thinks he's God, passing the orb of handball to St. Peter of New Jersey. All right, now, you sons of bitches, you know how I feel. I will be proud to lead you wonderful guys into handball battle anytime, anywhere. That's all.
Please welcome your host for the evening, Mark Lockenmeyer.
On the front, the U.S. Olympic team, this was a t-shirt that was given to all the Olympians in 1972. So if you look at you'll get some pictures on the internet, Steve Prefontaine and some famous Olympians wearing this particular t-shirt. This emblem that we put in the middle there, that was actually the emblem that was on the opening day ceremony blazers for the athletes of the U.S. Olympic team. And I don't know if Dennis and some of you guys still have that blazer, but you may remember that emblem there. On the back here, we have a list of everybody that was on the team. This right side, this team handball picture here, that was the actual picture that was used at the events in Munich that year.
Little of what was said at the meeting has been recorded for posterity, but out of it came the Army Champs program.
Team handball combines the skills of basketball, soccer, and volleyball, and is played either indoors or outdoors on a court slightly larger than that used in basketball,
which provided the training and infrastructure needed to take a sport that had been played only in the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area and spread it across the country. Here's a little of that story.
Team handball has become increasingly popular in America, largely due to the efforts of Dr. Peter Buning, one of this country's leading enthusiasts and a former Olympic player.
So I went in and played center back that day against what I, in friendly terms, call a bunch of street fighters. They were kids that hadn't played 20, 22 years old. They'd never played college sports. They were adequate athletes, but adequate is probably the highest order I could give them. And I was by far the best player that day, except for a guy named Sippy, big black guy. He was a left back. He knew how to play because he had played up in Canada. He was good, and Laszlo was playing. We all know who Laszlo was. And he was, then I moved him over to right back, so he was kind of my mentor in that particular day. But after we played, I mean, I was really good to start with, and the other guys, I say this respectfully, were really bad.
Jim served in Vietnam to start his 23 years of Army service, which, thanks to a master's degree in industrial and systems engineering and a PhD in operations research, ended on the NATO staff in Germany. In the handball world, he was always the guy who got things done.
My dad was a factory worker. He could not even afford to get me home for the holidays. I had to work in the cafeteria to make enough money to take a train to come home for Thanksgiving, Christmas. And knowing how he was struggling to just make ends meet for my sister and my two younger brothers, I went to West Point for totally all the wrong reasons. I went there to financially take a burden off my mom and dad.
He was a professor, he was a dean of a college. All the while that he was, he raised a great family. He's got a great wife.
So he was a disciplined coach. He was stoic. He didn't show a lot of emotion. But moving to when he did show emotion, I recall him always getting hyped when there was a Peter Buing team or a Laszlo Uric team. He knew that those were big games for him.
There was a handball fundraising event, and these little, what look like stanchions, are actually jock straps. And at this fundraising event, Jim and I got into a bidding war. And finally we realized, listen, why don't you just take it for a year, and I take it for a year, and we'll continue that tradition. So before you come up here, it's here for you. Keeping my word. Here's where now I have about 8 things here that I would say dedicated, highly organized, self-made, intellect, goal-oriented, but mostly my friend. Mostly my friend. Jim?
My first hour, literally my first hour during my first assignment to West Point, I'm in my office putting pencils and papers and rulers, getting my desk organized for the first time. 3 cadets walk in and they said to me, "Sir, we understand you have played and coached this sport. We played in intramurals, but we really would like to form a club." And in 1976, that was approved. I was very fortunate. Dr. Peter Buing, whom most of you know, gave me the opportunity in 1974 when I was at Ohio State University to run the national championships. That singular opportunity probably is what gave me and solidified my love for the sport as both a player, a coach, and an administrator. In the year 2000, I was honored by West Point. They named an award called the James J. Thome Senior Leadership Award, which is given generally to a senior who exemplifies leadership on and off the team handball court. There are numerous people I need to thank. Let me start by first of all thanking my wife, Patricia, and my 2 boys who were not able to make it here tonight, who supported me during all my handball years and endured my many absences when they had events going on. To Mike Cavanaugh, who's just been unbelievable throughout the 49 years we've known one another in helping me in just about everything I've ever done in team handball. Great person, and I'm honored to be receiving his award tonight. I've had the experience of working with an unbelievable variety of people, novices, national team players, Olympians, and I've learned so much from each and every one of them that I can't tell you what that really has meant to me. And finally, I'd like to thank the American Handball Associates Committee for bestowing this honor on me tonight. Thank you very much.
Things, for instance, you look at the Ohio State program, we finished second this past year just behind West Point, a close 1-point loss in the championship game, but one of our players got signed to the FCH program, which is the Forum Club Handball. For those of you unaware, it's basically an agreement that the U.S. and China have with a lot of premier clubs to bring their players into elite programs in Europe to help them grow that talent and bring it back to the respective countries. And so one of our players from Ohio State, he's in Portugal right now training at FC Porto, a Champions League club. And that's something that we're really excited about, and it's really paving the way for future talented players. And Joey's been very involved with spending a lot of time in Europe and making a lot of relationships with different general managers and clubs over there to help create this kind of pipeline that we can send players from the Midwest to these European clubs. And one thing that I'm very focused on is that every year, every kid has a spring break. And so one thing that we talk about at Ohio State is, you could go spend $1,000 at Miami or somewhere in Florida and go on spring break, or you could go spend the same amount of money and have a trip to Europe.
Detroit is a city that, despite its hardship, despite its uncertainty, you know what Detroit is and what it's all about. It's gritty, it's a community, hard-hitting, no BS, but it's also beautiful. And in a lot of ways, it's a match made in heaven for the sport of handball.
Handball, pretty simple. You guys have all seen videos on YouTube of handball. Pretty much the same principle, except smaller court. Besides that, you can't go into your opponent's goal area. You can't go into your own. Most goals wins. It's pretty cut and dry. You guys have any questions? All right, let's play some handball.
I think handball has to sort of form its own identity here in the United States. American handball players tend to bring their own style, and that's usually from the previous sport they played, whether it's hockey, lacrosse, basketball, football, soccer. The guys who come and play handball bring different elements of that game to the handball court.
I think it's special when it's a couple of American born and raised guys who really have a passion for the sport, who pick up the torch from your generations and bring it forward. So that's one unique thing about the Detroit Handball Club. And on top of that, we're also attempting to be somewhat strategic in how we grow the sport. We want to do it in a way that's sustainable economically and practical logistically. Mainly, we have, obviously our adult team. We call it the semi-professional team. And that serves as sort of a marketing tool that we can use both for adult athletes who may be transitioning out of baseball, football, whatnot, but also for kids, because kids don't really care if, it's LeBron James or, just the guy in the Detroit jersey. They just see a cool athlete who's throwing a ball really fast and hitting people. So that's sort of the approach with the adult team. With the kids, we're still finding our way. We formed a partnership with the city of Detroit where all the kids, all 50,000 kids in the school district are going to have handball as part of their curriculum, which we're hoping is sort of a first step to introducing the game beyond just school. So that's one youth initiative. We also partnered with the Detroit Pistons and their philanthropic arm to do programs for kids in underprivileged areas. And of course, we're now trying to sort of grow the competitive youth side of things.
And then there's a loose ball, and we go on, and somebody gives me the ball, and I'm out in front, boom, another goal. So now we're up by 2. We got the momentum, and a couple of minutes later, I got a third goal. So I had scored 5 goals. We're up by 3, and they just, I wouldn't say they gave up, but they deflated. One of the pictures shows us right after the game, and the smiles on right in the center in the back. And I kept that. I don't keep a lot of my athletic artifacts, but I kept that picture because I'm right in the middle of it with a big smile and a peace sign on my chest. And that's what I felt about our team and the Olympics and winning that day. And I was so excited.
When we made the Olympic team, life changed. And that was after Elkhart. Our meal program was much better. We were treated differently by the military. We were Olympians. And so there were things, especially for me in the military, not everybody was in it, but there were things that they did that made it so much easier. You don't have to be here at 9 in the morning anymore. You know, we expect you to be training.
And we were walking through part of Munich before we entered the stadium, and they opened the doors. And there you see the throngs of people cheering, and the music and the flags and all of it. You get kind of choked up. You walk in there and you hear and you see you're representing the United States in a sport that now has some of the best, not all, many of the best athletes in the world are here representing their countries, doing likewise. And it's very humbling. It really is. And I remember myself walking through going, God, 2 short years ago, if I didn't go to that gym one night and play basketball with Roger Baker, I probably would have been in Vietnam, and who knows what would have happened.
So then we had Yugoslavia, we're in it, and then we walked away and we said, you know, we can win. And we faced Spain the next game. Spain is listed, they were in the top 10 in the world, and we knocked them off. It was a huge upset, 22-20. And the handball world just couldn't believe it. I mean, it was news. And I can hear them now. I know what they were saying. They're saying, how can those guys who came over here and were losing to third level club teams just a year ago rise up and beat Spain, a number 8 team in the world? Because it's almost unbelievable. When you try to play a sport, as you know, I'm not telling you anything, but when you try to play a sport and learn a sport in 16 months, and the other teams have been playing all their life, it's very difficult.
Realizing the athletic potential of Dennis and his brothers, Lester Berkholtz, a salesman who knew he could work anywhere, made a decision to move the family to a more metropolitan area where the athletic opportunities would be better. He and his wife, Marie, chose Whitefish Bay, just north of Milwaukee, the kind of community that was a perfect place to raise a family as well as future All-Stars. Indeed, the Berkholtz boys became local heroes along that stretch of Lake Michigan and all of Wisconsin in Dennis's case. He was all-state basketball and excelled at virtually any sport he played. When he graduated in 1963, he was headed to Kansas State, a star recruit of the legendary coach Tex Winter.
My dad tells the story of him understanding that his sons had a lot of athletic ability and he didn't really want them stuck in a small town. So he moved us to Milwaukee, or moved the family to Milwaukee, and sought out the best school system with the best athletic possible in the city. We ended up in Whitefish Bay. And in fact, it was probably, still is, it's the #1 school in the state of Wisconsin.
Well, what I'm leading to is in truth, Dennis is an idea guy. He's a visionary, thinks out of the box, and willing to take risks because he sees the reward. And the rewards are always for the athletes, never for him. And it's wonderful to share my ideas and reflections, and now we get to hear from you.
I don't want to talk about myself or about handball per se. I want to tell you where I think we've gone wrong, or at least not right, over the many, many years. We watched today about 4 or 5 videos here. We never saw kids playing. We only saw teams. We saw Olympic teams, national teams, club teams. But one of the big issues that I have with handball over the years, and I've been an advocate of this, Michael and I talked about it a lot, but we never accomplished anything, and that's getting kids playing handball. Without kids, we'll never have a sport in the States that are going to accomplish winning gold medals or world championships. We'll never give our kids a chance to play the greatest team, the greatest game in the world. And I'm here to tell you tonight that we've got to start youth programs. When General Westmoreland started the Army Champs program, part of that program was for the Army to also go into the communities and teach the kids how to play, at that time, to overcome the fears of being in the Army with Vietnam. But again, we didn't do that. We never got a foothold with the kids program. So I'm telling you, all of you in the program here, I heard Detroit
talk here. I think it was excellent, especially at the end when you mentioned getting kids playing handball. If I were the president of handball again, or if I were higher up and still involved, I would set forth the following rule. If you're going to play for the national championships every year on an annual basis, you have to have had a junior program started in order to play in that upper level. In 1972, we had really, really good athletes. And as Rick and Bob said, we were all really well-versed in sports, all the sports. We were high-level guys. We played the best competition, but we couldn't win because we didn't grow up playing handball. In '76, we didn't have much of a chance to win because we couldn't get together and play a lot. We were kind of weekend warriors. In '84, they had the great opportunity to be together for a couple of years. They had really good teams. And they couldn't win when you get to the highest level. In '96, these guys trained for 2.5 years. They had $1 million budget, the men and the women. They traveled around. They spent, I think it was 6 weeks in Hungary or Yugoslavia or somewhere. And they got to the Olympic Games in Atlanta. I think they won 1 game, but they couldn't win because they never grew up playing handball. We got to get more involved, guys. I've given my heart and soul to the game because I love the game and I want to pay back. And I want more people to do that. They don't have to do what I do or what I did, which is give a lot. And Mike's given his life. Jim's given a lot of time. But there aren't enough of us. I think that the guys that are putting on this thing, and I know Mark now with the AHA, he's doing a great job giving back. It's hard to give, and you look around and you see your friends and they don't give. The one thing that happens with Olympic athletes and maybe national team athletes, and Rick and Bob, they've been part of this. I was probably the only guy that carried on, but what happens in '72 and '84 and in '96, when we had really, really good guys, good teams, good girls, good teams, is after the games they go home, and rightfully so. They get married, they get a job, and they give up handball. And it just can't happen that way. You got to find a place in your life for the game that gave you so much. But it hasn't happened, and we've got to encourage each other. And for you guys in this room, you gals in this room, find a way to give back. It's really, really important to help the sport. Handball is the greatest game in the world. I was a great athlete when I grew up, playing a lot of sports. I've never played a game as good as handball. And I think Rick and Bob and the guys that played in '84 and '96 and the girls would say the same thing. There's no better game in the world than handball. Some of these games might be fun. That's good. But handball has everything. Hard-hitting, fast-paced, high-scoring, and the greatest guys and the greatest gals in the world. Thank you for this honor. I appreciate it.